Excellent. So how many people here have heard of the Daily Mail? Good. How many are regular readers of the newspaper? Good. So the Daily Mail is one of the oldest newspapers in the UK. It was formed in the 1890s by the Harmsworth brothers. I'm trained to say that. Thankfully, I have nothing to do with the Daily Mail newspaper. My job on a day-to-day basis is keeping the Mail Online running. It's a bit confusing because we're served on dailymail.co.uk and we are the online version of the Daily Mail newspaper, but actually we have nothing to do with it. It's a difficult one to explain, but there it is. In terms of what we do and who we are, we're the largest online newspaper in the world. We overtook the New York Times in January. We serve around 137 million unique browsers each month, about 154 billion images, most of them of Kim Kardashian. Some other interesting nuances. You may recognize our homepage. It's legendary. And just to give you a reason why, it doesn't view that well here, unfortunately. How do I zoom out? There we go. Our homepage on an average day is about 32,000 pixels long. There you go. That entire page, I quite like Substack's talk because we use progressive enhancement. We serve the entire thing in one go from Akamai. Works perfectly, great for SEO, but unfortunately, let me switch back. While it's great for SEO, it's not particularly great. If I can find keynotes, there we go. Oh, sorry, I forgot about this one. One of the funnier parts about our site is that we're quite renowned for the depth of our page, as I said, but also we got featured in the Poke at one point because they seemed to think that our sidebar of shame was getting so long that actually we were reaching the 3rd level of hell, and sometime around September this year we're going to reach the 9th level of hell. So, and it is pretty impressive. On any given day, there'll be around 180 articles in that sidebar, and we basically, that sidebar, there's a person whose job it is. So there's one in London, there's one in New York, whose job it is to do nothing but optimize which articles appear in that list. I don't think you can apply for that job. So as I said, we're a global business. So obviously we formed out of the Daily Mail, but our ambitions are absolutely global. This is a picture of our New York office. We've also got an office in LA. We have obviously one in the center of London, in High Street, Kensington, and soon to have ones in Mumbai and Australia, probably Sydney, I guess. The interesting thing about what we've done and how we've got to where we are is we basically still broadcast the news. Like a traditional newspaper, if you visit our website, you basically get the same pages that everybody else does. Now, that's fantastic for me because it basically means that I can serve the entire of that 137 million people with 4 web servers. I obviously pay Akamai an awful lot of money, but it makes my life simple. There's a problem, though, which is obviously the world's moving to mobile. You know, we'll be in a point very soon where on our site, certainly more than 50% of the traffic will come from mobile devices. The problem with people on mobile devices is they don't want 32,000 pixel homepages. So what we're having to do is basically decide who sees what content. Now, the challenge of who sees what content is that you have to know a little bit about people, and ultimately our caching strategy with Akamai gets shot to shit. So we basically have to think different. And for us, that's where Node came in. So since I joined the Mail roughly 2 years ago, it's nearly my 2-year anniversary, we've basically been slowly but surely moving towards more of a kind of event-based architecture built around this kind of idea of kind of composition of smaller microservices. In that's the sort of world for us that despite the fact that we come from a very much a, you know, I think, as Bill, I think it was, described, this kind of legacy Java world, that's our world. We have to move to this to survive. And Node is just a perfect fit. And I really like it. I did some Node programming before I joined the Mail, but it was only in my spare time. I didn't get a chance to use it at work. And when they put me in charge at the Mail, I got to use it, so that's even better. So where do we start in terms of production? So we've had Node in production since March last year. The first app that we built on it basically was a real-time analytics platform on top of Redis. Basically, the use case was simple. You can imagine my editor sitting there manually editing that 32,000 pixel homepage, and he makes decisions on a minute-by-minute basis about which article should be at the top. So he makes those decisions regardless of whether I give him any analytics, but obviously giving him insight as to who's clicking on what makes him feel more comfortable that he's making the right decisions. So we presented him with this after a bit of a kind of weekend hackathon involving only myself. My team still hate me for it, and they're still refactoring out all my code, but anyway. But ultimately what this did was that it proved that this kind of idea of using new technology in new and interesting ways works. Made my editor very happy. And we were able to move on and do other things with Node, which is even better. Some other things that we're doing. So Steve, one of the guys in the audience in my team, has built a dynamic ad slot management platform. May seem like a strange requirement, but for a massive publisher, you can imagine, we're serving literally billions of pages a day, and the optimization of which ads go on which page for which device in which geography. That's our entire business, right? It's how we make money, it's how we survive. So we use Node to make those decisions on a device, geography, person basis about which ads you should see. We've also built a service that does what we call editorialized e-commerce. So this is kind of a standalone micro app that our editors can drop into celebrity articles to enable us to sell dresses and shoes and handbags that the celebrities might be wearing. Also Tom, who's in the audience, built this. Another thing we built this year was we've started to build out more of a kind of live commentary. There's a lot of publishers have this kind of live blogging type idea. We're building ours out on top of Node. The first iteration of it's purely web-based, but this is going to move into mobile. We're going to be using WebSockets and try and get this to be much more live and interactive in terms of particularly the sweet spots around sport events, but it's also could be really interesting around things like second screen applications around the Oscars and other things like that. So what's our Node stack look like? It's pretty boring actually. We use the fairly standard things, so all our apps are pretty much based on Express. We predominantly use Mustache for templating, simply because it's the lowest common denominator, and we use things other than Node. In terms of persistence, we store pretty much everything in Elasticsearch, and we use Redis as a caching layer for things like lists, top articles, that sort of stuff. We have all our entire backlog of 1.2 million articles in Elasticsearch, which we use to drive the site, as well as applications around the content. We write JavaScript in our apps very functionally. So we're heavy users of things like async and underscore, Lodash, all that sort of stuff. And the other language of choice, which I'll touch on a bit later, for all the other work we do is Clojure. So, from a sort of development perspective, and certainly around kind of content management, content distribution, writing code in a very functional way is low friction. We also have this kind of concept, which I will also touch on, and I'll credit Fred George for this, is around microservices. Similar to kind of what was discussed earlier around the kind of happy plugin concept, but we've got a slightly different take on it, and we'll be hopefully talking a bit more about what we're doing and the way that we structure applications to make them maintainable as they get bigger. We're also heavy users of Joint, so we use their in-house SDC on some existing infrastructure. I think we have the most expensive data center in London, in the center of High Street, Kensington, and also we're using their public cloud. But similar to Bill, we didn't start this way. This is kind of a happy nirvana where we're using Node and Clojure, building great new apps. We certainly didn't start here. So when I joined the Mail Online, the application running the Mail Online was a classic Spring app. It had been around for literally years, almost a decade. Literally hundreds of thousands of lines of Java, pretty much every programming style you could ever imagine. There were aspects, there were all sorts of stuff. Our entire JavaScript for the front end was based on a version of Ext from Sencha that was like 6 years old. It was like the 1.0 or something. And a 15-year-old Oracle schema that you couldn't change if your life depended on it. And no tests, just for fun. So it's okay though, because when I started, they were already rebuilding it. They were rebuilding it as a J2E app on top of Oracle, using XSLT. Come on. They'd been doing it for 8 months and they didn't have a single thing live. And the team was split front to back. The Pegasus is there because that's the name of the project. It was awesome. I don't want to say bad things about them because ultimately they were making what they felt were the right choices within the constraints that they had. But that got stopped. But it did get me thinking, because ultimately, I had a problem to solve. That problem was basically this massive legacy stack. That legacy stack was serving literally millions of people every day, as well as my, global editorial team. So I needed to come up with something. The thing that really struck me, and I'm not going to claim credit for the first one because that's Conway's law, is that ultimately the design of any system ultimately mirrors the structure of the organization that creates it. So Pegasus, for example, the reason they stuck XSLT in the middle was because there was a back-end team and a front-end team. They wanted a nice simple layer where basically the two teams could work independently. The other thing was that ultimately, in an environment driven by fear, whether that be fear of a change having unintended consequences, or fear of something you do upsetting the publisher and him coming out and throwing a cigar at you, you can't have kind of the creativity that's required to come up with genuinely interesting and innovative technical solutions. So that was the first sort of light bulb and challenge. The second big challenge, and this was kind of just looking through the team and their aspirations and skills, was I kind of call this the good people catch-22, which is good people only want to work with good people. And often within an enterprise environment, it's difficult to attract the sort of engineers that you want to really drive a kind of dramatic shift. And ultimately, those people also want to be working on interesting things. They want ownership, and they want this freedom from fear. They want the ability to give something a go and fail. Not many enterprise environments have that. So it was sort of during this period where I was sort of searching around for a role that I called chief architect, but the reality was I was just looking for somebody who could help me drive forward the kind of technology strategy. I met a guy called Fred George. He came in and applied for the position. Some of you may have met Fred. Hands up, who's seen one of Fred's talks? Fred put his hand up, good. So Fred and I had a really long chat about this kind of concept that he had called programmer anarchy. And I think I'm not going to steal Fred's thunder. There's a link there to some of his slides. If you've never seen it before, go and have a look. He's mentioned of Forward, where he worked before, as well as Mail Online. But what I'm going to do is just summarize it, because it's important to explain how we made the transition from this kind of boring enterprise stack and boring enterprise environment filled with fear to one today where we're really trying to push the boundaries with functional programming, closure node, build something genuinely interesting. So my term for it is developer-driven development. It's much safer than telling the CEO of your business that you're about to implement programmer anarchy. Though we did do that, by the way. So the crux of it is this. There's no unnecessary roles separating the developer from the customer. No project managers, no business analysts, no testers. There's no unnecessary process. So we don't use Scrum, Kanban, or Lean. I don't enforce any process. The team that picks up a task has ownership end-to-end. So what we try and do is we try and structure work so that there's the minimum number of dependencies you can. Obviously not always possible, we always try to. And within the context of the challenge that I've given you, you've got the freedom to make your own choices. So if you turn up to work tomorrow and decide that you want to rewrite that app you just built in Go, I'd ask you to leave, but no, you've got the freedom to, I'll give you the opportunity to prove it and succeed or fail. How does that actually work in practice? Because it sounds a bit airy-fairy. It's fairly simple. So we work around this concept of a table. There's a broad kind of team backlog of the kind of strategic work either I want to do or my publisher wants to do, or the kind of broader changes and new products that exists. When tables finish the work they're on, they can pick something else up. So for example, the football live thing was something that was a kind of a new product that was sitting on the backlog, that when Tom's team finished Female Fashion Finder, they just moved straight onto it and picked it up. They chose to build it in a very similar way. They may have chosen something different. People can move among tables. They can be kicked out of tables. And obviously they can apply to another one, but depending on skills and whether it's already full, they might not get accepted. And they're very small. So we have tables of 2 people working on tasks, and the biggest is probably bigger than 6 at the moment, but we're about to break it in half. They have end-to-end responsibility, including ops. So if it breaks, they fix it. And tables choose whatever process works for them. Does that sound insane or good? Good. So then how do I keep all that pointing in the right direction? Because if everybody just did their own thing, then we could end up anywhere. The original technology vision was stated by me. So this idea of saying we want to move to small services, event-based, kind of fairly firm boundaries in terms of, the role and purpose of any single piece of software. That was my vision. Obviously, that's in a little bit more depth on a few pictures, but that's the crux of it. But now the execution and evolution of that's owned by the team. Now, clearly there's some people on the team who don't care and they just want to get on with writing code. There's others who really care about thinking about what's next. So different members have different levels of involvement. The other thing that works is obviously we're co-located from our, literally meters from our news desk. So, if the female fashion finder ladies have a problem entering information about a handbag, they walk 5 meters and tell Tom that he broke it. So in addition to these micro apps, the other big success we've had this year, and I hesitated about talking about this because it's a Node conference, but we have killed that 155,000 line Java app. One of the tables picked it up as a task, and it's a big bloody task, and they rebuilt it in about 4,000 lines of closure. There's obviously a lot more templates and stuff, but the core of it is about 4,000 lines of closure. So that was the first part of our journey, which was killing the publishing side, the front end. The next part, and the big part that we're about to attack now, is basically killing all of our authoring tools. Everything that we do internally is bespoke. The tools and processes that our journalists use, we see them as a competitive advantage. Our ability to publish fast, engaging content faster than everybody else is a genuine competitive advantage. So we're going to be attacking those authoring tools next. And while I'm going to pretend to give people the choice, they're going to build them in Node. So the ultimate takeaway, I think, is obviously Node's, I wouldn't say it's a risky choice for the sort of things that we did. I think the use cases where I selected it for, certainly initially, are the kind of obvious ones, I guess. We put a different spin on it at times, but I think it's now starting to really pick up a head of steam, and I think, internally we're starting to develop tools, our own libraries and things like that are trying to accelerate things. So I think, each week we're learning more. I think as an organization we don't yet contribute enough back, but hopefully that'll change very soon and we'll start to contribute more and more back to the community and be more involved in events like this. So personally I'm looking forward to that. And obviously the process changes we put in place have made the developers very happy on the whole part. And the end result being that our customers are very happy. So, the fact that we've been given the freedom to do what we've done, I think, is in large part testament to the fact that using something like Node made us as productive as we did and allowed us to solve problems that genuinely people didn't think could be solved at that point. So, thank you to everyone here.